Hello, welcome and welcome back. This is Jacob and today we will continue the memory mapping narrations for IS3, and in this video we'll be going over the full memory mapping for Operator Lumen. However, before we begin, as per usual, to anybody new to the channel and potentially to the different endings for IS3, all of those playlists can be found in the description of the video for both the memory mappings and the different endings that have been so far included into Mizuki and Cerulean Arbor. And as a quick little bonus, if you want even more on that and you are not familiar yet with the Arknights and Stultifera side stories, full narrated and character voiced side stories of both of those, aka playlists of both of those, can be found as well in the description of this video. And as a quick little bonus, if you do already know the Stultifera Navis side story, for example, one particular name that will be mentioned during today's memory mapping will probably trigger some memories from Stultifera and a certain connection as well on top of it. So for anybody new, I would recommend going through those side stories, especially if you love Lovecraftian stuff. You'll probably enjoy your time with those stories. Alright, with that out of the way, let us begin with Lumen's memory mapping. So, this is memory number 3, titled Watchman. And here on the left it says, "Only he burns bright as daylight." And the memory goes as follows. Part 1. The weather on the Iberian coastline can be fickle. Jordi Fontanarosa has an important job to do every Sunday afternoon, but today he simply cannot bear the sound of the rain falling outside, each drop feeling like a hammer blow to his heart. He knows the name of this feeling. He cannot continue to write and puts down his pen to try to leave the paper-filled room. He smells the familiar scent of the wet earth mixed with a faint tinge of blood. It does not just represent a type of weather or a season, but a difficult period. Whenever there is news from the front, whenever the wet air fills his nostrils, Jordi is again reminded of the times. It has been like this ever since the fall of the Jaeger. It is almost dusk, though Iberia's last redoubt is bright as midday under the illumination of countless lights. Jordi tries to ignore the chatter of the penal battalion officers in their dull and strictly regulated tones. The words spoken here behind the front lines are neither determined nor despondent, but largely numb and indifferent. Jordi counts his own steps until he collides head-on with someone else. Sorry, sir." The man's youth surprises Jordi. He's about Jordi's height, sturdy in build, but missing an arm. He has not bothered to wipe away the blood on his face, despite being here at headquarters. Jordi thought he must have been a veteran of many battles, but when his gaze meets the young man's eyes and the battered lantern and sword in the young man's baggage, he realizes that it is a young trainee inquisitor from Jaeger. Jordi once knew a young inquisitor like him. "Have you just returned?" "Yes, Sir Secretary." The young inquisitor's tone is surprisingly calm, as though he has left the nightmares of the battlefield behind, but Jordi knows that it is a tragic sort of acclimation to the cruelties of war. He has seen it far too many times. He steps aside to give way to the young inquisitor. He knows that his type is few and far between these days. The young inquisitor nods and passes by Jordi. His silhouette is unsteady, looking as though it could melt into the shadows of the buildings at any moment. Jordi turns around and asks, "What's your name?" "Matthias, sir." "That's not an Jaeger name." "My foster mother is Iberian. Only my Jaeger surname remains." The young inquisitor hesitates, as though deliberating whether to spend valuable time talking about such private matters, but eventually he says, "Breogan." What?" "My family names is Breogan. I don't know anything about it other than the name. I don't even know if it's supposed to be a family name or the name of one of my ancestors. Our home has..." Jordi Fontanarosa falls silent. It is the young inquisitor who eventually breaks the silence. "I understand that you're Saint Carmen's, apostle?" The name makes Jordy's heart ache. He feels his stomach churn and wants to throw up. Fighting back the sensation of vertigo, he answers in a low voice, yes. Then he asks almost self-depreciatingly, are you disappointed? Disappointed that I'm not fighting with you on the front at a time like this? No, sir. Realizing that Jordy misunderstood what he meant, the young Inquisitor smiles wryly. Saint Carmen says we are the keepers of the flame, but you and others like you are the flame. Jordy has to hold back the lump in his throat and force a smile. Thank you. Perhaps it's a coincidence, but the name Breogan is not unknown to me. There's no evidence linking me to him, but I know some stories about Breogan. I know the legend of the shipwright, Sir Secretary. No. Jordy pauses for a moment, as memories gush to the surface. I've been to Ager. I've been home. The young Inquisitor's eyes light up for an instant, but his longing for his bloodline is soon suppressed by other matters. Thank you. I hope we meet again. The young Inquisitor leaves. The rain is getting heavier. Jordy returns to his disorganized office, to the sound of the bell announcing the nightly hours. He cleans up the mess on his desk, returning it to the presentable state that it was several weeks ago. He takes a deep breath, but he could no longer hold back his emotions. Fear, sorrow, and resentment swallow him in an instant. He chokes on his own sobbing, and it is all he could do to prevent his tears from falling onto the typewriter. He types a line beneath missing persons. Carmen E. Iberia, confirmed dead. Part 2. 1,300 kilometers. It takes a moment for Jordy to realize that he made the exclamation, and eyes around the hall turn towards him. The first to understand the significance of what he said is High Inquisitor Irene, who stops to gaze at the map in the middle of the hall. 1,300 kilometers from the lighthouse of Gran Faro. Irene lets herself sink in her memories for a moment. Our national border, humanity's line of defense, has retreated by 1,300 kilometers. Jordy sighs. It could have been worse, if not for the support of the other countries. At the same time, it also means that the entire might of Terra is gathered on the defensive lines of Iberia. There is no second line of defense. For all intents and purposes, this 1,300 kilometer of land belongs to the oceans now. Jordy continues to gaze across the hall, unsure where to go. The line is far from secure. The Seaborn are not only invading through Iberia, Sargon, Ursus, Yan. The fires of war have spread across the land. Yes, this is our mission. If any Victorian Viscount or Padisha of Sargon could be a deep cultist, then all is lost. This time, however, we killed the bishops leading those sea terrors, leaving none alive. Yet the Seaborn continue to invade the land. Something is guiding them. Jordy is stunned. But the Deep Viscount is dead. By the hands of the Lethanian lawkeepers. Could there be another? Or perhaps the Collective has sensed a greater danger and is thus trying to assimilate and consolidate the land ecosystem for the sake of its survival. Irene stops before a massive door. Jordy realizes that he has never been here before, despite having worked at the place for more than a decade. Therefore, we must succeed. Irene turns around, her still youthful face hardened by weariness. I have been restored to the station of High Inquisitor. I can see that. You already were in all but name. As High Inquisitor, there is something I must ask of you. Irene raises her lamp. Light fills the hall and opens a gap in the door as it drives out the shadows. A lantern. The great room might have been a prison, then a furnace, a workshop. Now, as various items lie covered in dust in the corners, there is a single lantern in the middle of the room. A Seaborn was once held here. Every Inquisitor came to learn the truth about the ocean before they were ordained. Irene's voice is utterly calm. But there is no need for that anymore. So the place has been repurposed into a furnace?
Yes.
And the lamp? Irene approaches it, as though approaching a god that does not exist. She picks it up, and light fills Jordy's vision. Not so much a flame as a sun.
Carmen, Dario, Johann, Carlos, all the inquisitorial lanterns that we could retrieve, reforged into one. We have thought long and hard about what to call it, but we have made no decision.
Irene seizes her casting, and the light returns to its tiny glass prison.
The Inquisition has entrusted the task to you.
Me?
Do you know how to use a lantern?
I've been taught by Saint Carmen, but I'm no inquisitor.
It does not matter. All that matters is you can light it, or seek the next person who can, if you cannot dispel your doubts.
Irene smiles. Jordy recalls with a start that the two of them are the same age.
You have borne witness to the struggles of the Inquisition, watched over the triumphs from the lighthouse. You remember the brave martyrs and the innocent victims. The lantern is not murder, it is hope.
Irene pauses for an instant, then continues,
You must remember it. Pass it on.
What about you? Jordy's words left his mouth before he even realized it.
We have a code name for the Seaborn that we must kill. Its name is...
Irene lets go and heads towards the door in the flickering light and shadow.
Claudia.
Part 3. When Jordy bid farewell to Calcit, the familiar woman had become a stranger. She was the builder of the last city, not the Dr. Calcit who taught Operator Lumen on that little ship. The people from Calcit's memory were not by her side, and Jordy had lost much himself. Jordy never mentioned Rhode Island in the short time that he lived in the city, fearing that the past would trigger the few remaining vestiges of hope.
The ocean remains dangerous, even if we've come to terms with our place.
Calcit was not surprised at Jordy's request.
We have been allowed to survive as an ancillary to the ecosystem, slave to the many, a part of the symbiosis. It doesn't mean that we can...
Calcit stops, seemingly recalling that the man coming to bid her farewell came from the eye of the maelstrom. I know. Jordy smiles. But I want to see the sea.
Do you need an escort?
No, not for an old paper pusher that no one cares about. Calcit said no more. She quickly arranged a vehicle and some supplies for Jordy. Certainly going home is not something to cause a commotion over. Jordy takes one last look at the city before he leaves. It no longer needs to move. The collective will only permit civilization that is at peace, and forever at a standstill. He remembers that he has never truly fought on the front lines or helped to build the city. His work has always been insignificant. When the lighthouse is lit, it is the light that guides the ships of Iberia, not the watchman of the lighthouse. He sits by a cliff. Coral-colored creatures stir the waters for miles, and smooth-shelled creatures rattle along the trail of waves. The sea is calm and peaceful, not a cloud in sight. Having conquered humanity, Originium, demons, and beings beyond reason, the way that the Seaborn observe the world is no longer limited to sensations that humans can comprehend. Jordy knows that the new Chitin god lingers somewhere above the waves, at the most remote corner between the sun and the clouds. Its tendrils have left the pocket where it hid at the very moment that this human left his nest and headed for the coast, on guard against each and every move made by this anomalous individual. Today, it is Terra, and it is a beacon for its kin who have ventured beyond the skies. Surprisingly, the individual seems to have detected its will with his primitive human eyes. Hello, Ocean. Jordy speaks, like an old man telling a story to a child, unconcerned whether the individual constituents of the many remaining on Terra can hear him. My name is Jordy Fontana Rosa. I was once an insignificant enemy of yours. With this self-introduction, Jordi begins to tell the story of his life. Grand Pharaoh, Aegir, Stultifera Navis, Abyssal Hunter, Home, War, Collapse, Awakening, God, Truth, Failure, Death, Parting, Shame, Peace. His words are sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes loud, sometimes short. No one can answer, save for the wind brushing by the strange palms by the share, through the holes in the coral mountains. Eventually the old man runs out of words. He gazes at the shore. Without warning, the ocean responds to his thought. Microorganisms turn the sea murky, drawing numerous shelled sea terrors, which merge together, twisting and warping themselves into a small boat. The many have read his thoughts and expressed them, but Jordi no longer cares why they did so. He smiles and shakes his head. No, you're wrong. I'm sorry, but you lost. The waves do not answer. The last Watchman of Iberia does not speak. The sun continues to shine. The sounds of the winds, waves, and shells rubbing against one another converges and tune themselves into a specific wavelength and frequency. One of the many, and all of the many, answer the last words of one little individual on their home planet. Goodbye, Jordi Fontana Rossa. Goodbye. And that is how the memory mapping for Jordi, aka Lumen, ends. And it really ends. What can I say about that one? But yeah, this one kinda partially links into the textual endings for ending 2 of IS2. Now, I don't think it's the same timeline of mostly because of what is described towards the end, especially the mention of Gladia, but also the significant mention of the fact that yes, Breogan had descendants. And considering that yes, this is a completely different timeline, the events don't obviously matter to the overall structure of the world building of Arknights, because this is its own thing. But, however, certain things obviously carry over. The timelines are mostly different in the fact of something awoke and it's guiding the sea terrors essentially towards land, and well, they're winning. That is the biggest difference in all of this thing between what we know about or rather what we know about the current situation between humanity versus sea terror and this timeline where different stuff happens. However, even if it's a different timeline, certain events carry over, and the mentioning of Breogan having a descendant is kinda insane to me, because I was thinking when I was reading Stultifera, maybe this guy had a descendant at some point, and his family bloodline is still going somewhere. I even thought for a moment that it might be Jordi, but apparently it's not Jordi who is a descendant. Maybe he is from, well, he definitely is from some of the Aegir that came with Breogan, but probably not a direct descendant. But this guy definitely is. Which is very significant to think about. But yeah, like I said, if you want to know more about Stultifera, or rather the story about Breogan, refer to the Stultifera Navis story, which covers pretty much not just the plotline that takes place for our operators there, but also diverges very hefty into the past, showcasing the arrival essentially of Breogan and what it caused for Iberia as a whole back in the past. But yeah, this will be it for today's episode. As always, thank you very much for listening. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like. It helps me a lot in the algorithm and obviously means a lot to me to know that you guys like these videos. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. There's a lot more like this on the channel. If you just want to sit back and listen to pretty much almost any side story or main story in Arknights at this point. But yeah, I hope you have a fantastic day. Hope the story hasn't depressed you as much as as much as it did me originally. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. Until then, bye bye.